The New York State Department of Transportation presents the DOT POD.
And welcome into the DOT POD. I am Josh Heller. She is Anya Cardos, and we are delighted to have you joining us here. Anya, how we doing?
Great. And we're going to talk about an important subject today, infrastructure and how rebuilding helps rebuild a community as well.
So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look back to not that long ago, just back in July. And I don't think there's anybody listening who doesn't remember the heavy and really destructive rainstorms that came in and washed away a ton of infrastructure in that time. And obviously what we're going to talk about today is one of those examples.
Today we're talking about the Route 28N bridge in Long Lake. For those of you who really don't know the area, Long Lake is a picturesque community located in Hamilton County. It's nestled in the heart of the Adirondacks. It's stunning. The town sits within NYSDOT's Region 2, which covers 6,146 square miles, serving 6 counties, including all of Hamilton County.
And obviously, they were one of a number of communities that really had some devastating effects from the rain. And the one we're really specifically going to talk about is the 28N bridge in Long Lake. And it's a bridge that, after the storm came through, there was no bridge to speak of anymore.
That's right. There aren't a lot of secondary roads in the area, and that meant that trucks transporting goods and services, residents and tourists, and of course this happened at a pretty rough time with summer tourism, they had to travel an 80-mile detour to make it from Long Lake if they wanted to go to the neighboring community of Newcomb. Which
is just it's untenable. That's borderline impossible.
Yeah, it was, and it really impacted not only the community, which also suffered some of their own losses. Residents had damage to their homes. There were other roadways that were damaged as well. But the response from the community, as well as the New York State Department of Transportation, was intense and swift.
And here to talk about the effort to not only restore the bridge, but also this crucial transportation vehicle for the public, we have Rick Zeller, who lives in Indian Lake and is NYSDOT's Assistant Resident Engineer for Hamilton County in the DOT. And we also have Chris Langett, who is Construction Supervisor for the 28N bridge replacement. So Chris, Rick, thanks so much for coming down. Thanks so much for taking some time and chatting with us.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you.
Now, Rick, you live in Indian Lake, which isn't far from Long Lake.
Right, yes.
And can you kind of describe the night of July 10th going into July 11th when the storm was really beginning to impact that community?
The rain started in the evening, and it just built hard rain. We had people go in and check the roads because of the hard rain, and that's when we started noticing the water overtaking the ditches, causing the flooding. Everything was coming up, and it was 5.5 inches of rain within a few hours, and it overtook the system.
Now, have you seen things like that? You know, you've been with the DOT for some time in that area. Is that's not a normal rainstorm. This is out of the ordinary, and obviously much worse than I think anyone expected.
Yeah, it was pretty centralized, and it's been many years since we had a rain event like that.
Describe kind of what the first few hours were like when the area was being impacted by this heavy rain and flooding, and when you got word about the bridge and what happened there.
In areas, it was 4 to 6 inches of water running down the roadway just for us to get up to Long Lake, to get to that area. And then we notified by the other people that the bridge was affected, and then we went there and closed the road after that, with some assistance from other agencies. Take
us to, you're there on the scene. At what point were you physically there and able to see what kind of was the damage, what we saw?
You really can't see a whole lot at night. It just all blends in. But in the morning at daylight, we were able to start assessing the damages.
Kind of take us back in time. How was the bridge compromised? And also, too, to kind of give a visual image for people who haven't seen this, it doesn't look, quote unquote, like a bridge. It's a roadway that goes over what appears to be kind of a marshy area. It's the fishing brook there. Talk about the area and how the bridge itself was compromised.
So the structure during the event, an upstream embankment let loose because of the storm. That embankment, as it flooded through, it took the supporting soils underneath that abutment, particularly the western abutment, and caused that abutment to partially collapse. Also took the deck and caused that to rotate and twist and collapse partially, leaving also behind that western abutment a void where we previously had the roadway that was, I don't know, probably 10 foot in width and 15 to 18 feet in depth. Underneath that abutment, it was completely void of any supporting material. So the structure was really incapable of taking any traffic. Thankfully, we had folks up there who were watching the structure and were able to catch it and make sure that no one tried to make their way across and no lives were lost or so.
And obviously we had Rick, nearby, so able to get there. You were, in the main office of the region. What's going on there as this is happening? Obviously there's communication going on, but you're trying to, not only assess what's happening, but, make sure that, everyone's staying safe, staying away, and obviously, making sure that, what did happen ultimately does happen, that no one did get hurt from this.
So I work in the regional construction office. So our response to this is really kind of after the fact, where Rick working in the residency, these guys were boots on the ground addressing the storm, the event, the failure of the structure, closing roadways. His maintenance folks and folks from other regions who came in assisted in getting things reopened so that essential services, ambulances, fire, food deliveries could still occur. So my response during the storm was really just wasn't really part of it. We were an after the fact. We're there to try to help clean things up and bring it back together. Where Rick and his folks were really there to help during the event.
Rick, can you talk a little bit about the impact on the community? This couldn't have happened at a worse time. It's the peak of the summer tourism season, and you have this happen. You can't get from one town to the next. It's a major artery throughout the area. What kind of an impact did you see around you when this happened?
It really slowed the community down because of the 80-mile detour to get back around that section. You could come in from other areas of the road, different roads. You could get into Long Lake, but you couldn't get to Newcomb, the town of Newcomb. That affected the community in several ways. The bank couldn't get money to the bank. Cash deliveries were delayed. Folks that work at the shops, the stewards and other places there could not get to there because coming from Newcomb, they had the 80-mile detour. So it just affected a lot of people, and even people were stranded in their camps and homes, or they couldn't get out because of their driveways washed out or the road was washed out. So there was people stranded. People were helping with boats, bringing deliveries of groceries and medicine to the folks that were stranded. It was quite a thing. The community really came together to help each other.
At what point, obviously the next day when you're able to kind of assess, at what point did you realize that this is past the point of no return, that this is something that's going to need to be completely redone as opposed to just kind of fixing it up?
That was, we closed the bridge before daylight because it was failed by that point, and that's when Chris's team came up and did the real assess with the engineers, the professional engineers.
So for you, when cleanup is concerned, what are your priorities, right? You're there. I mean, obviously there's debris all over the place. You have it closed, so you don't have to worry about that. But what's your first step of trying to move forward from the devastation that we saw?
Well, the bridge, once we closed the road in the 28N for the bridge, that's when we started and continued on bringing the road back up, structure back up to make it passable at least by one lane from Blue Mountain Lake to Long Lake, because there was several washouts there. So we worked on that. That's where we had the assistance from other towns and counties.
It's funny you mentioned that too, because obviously we're talking about the bridge specifically, but this was not the only issue that was going on because of these storms. Talk about some other damage that you saw. I mean, we saw houses and roads just kind of a mess. So yes, we're specifically talking about the bridge, but this was not isolated by any means.
No, there was Blue Mountain Lake, the village of Blue Mountain Lake, where Adirondack Museum is, the Adirondack Experience it is called now. That area there had a lot of runoff off of Blue Mountain itself, and that caused a lot of washouts through that whole section of roadway in front of the Adirondack Experience.
right after the flood, the clock was really ticking for you guys. You had to come up with a solution, and you did, a temporary bridge. Talk about that.
So the construction office, I and our staff, we decided we needed to get up there and get firsthand eyes on it to really get an understanding of what had happened up there. And when we got up there, we realized that coming out of Long Lake, heading towards Newcomb, there was a several thousand-foot section of roadway that had been obliterated. There was a 4.5-mile section of residences and others that they were landlocked. And those who wanted to get from Long Lake to Newcomb or Newcomb back to Long Lake for employment or whatever were just unable to do that. And there's concerns of public safety and other things. So we looked at that structure and we said, well, what can we do to get this opened as quickly as possible? And the contractor who we were working with, who was part of our statewide emergency bridge response, he handed it off to a competent bridge builder. And we met on site and we said, well, what can we do to get this reopened? He had, as part of his inventory, what's known as an acro bridge. It's a modular. It's a modular type structure that goes together in panels that a couple people could physically pick up and move, except for maybe the floor girders where you need some equipment to move them around. And we said, you know what, if we can get this acro structure installed over the existing structure, we think within a few weeks, maybe 3 weeks, we can have this thing reopened and reopen that vital corridor between Long Lake and Newcomb. So we brought that to department managers and engineers and said, you know, we think this is going to get us our quickest route to getting the facility reopened. And it was decided that was in fact maybe the best option. So we began immediately moving forward with having those implements and parts brought in. We also ended up working with Acro, who's the manufacturer of the structure. They helped us with assembly and design plans. We ended up working with our partners in Region 8 at DOT. They had some necessary parts that we needed. It was really kind of a combined effort to see how quickly can we get this done. So we were able to span this temporary structure over top of the existing, several foot above, build approaches so that traffic could make its way across. And within 3 weeks of the event, we had that vital corridor reopened so that people could get to work.
So you have this temporary bridge now over top. How are you able to move forward in working on the actual bridge itself to get a permanent structure in there?
So in working with our regional design and main office design staff, they pulled record plans from the original construction of the bridge. And just to the north of the existing structure, there had previously been a detour alignment where a temporary structure had been placed during the construction of this existing that had failed. And we said, you know what, that's a great place for us to go in there and put a diversion alignment. So we brought in another contractor and we started construction of this diversion alignment to the north of the existing bridge location. With that diversion alignment intent being, we can take the acro structure from where it is now over the existing alignment, we can swing it over onto the new alignment in a single day's operation, and now move traffic off the existing roadway onto a diverted alignment, opening that area up for us to be able to reconstruct the new bridge. So within 3 weeks of the incident, we had the structure on the existing alignment with the structure over. And then within a few weeks following that, we were able to put that existing structure or that acro structure onto the diverted alignment and have traffic now away from that damaged structure. And now we could start reconstruction. We could start demolition. We could start the pile driving activities and all of that work to bring that structure back.
In general, when you are designing, putting in a new bridge, what kind of timelines are we looking at, generally speaking, in a normal situation versus what we saw here in a much more expedited situation?
Many months. And I have to give credit to our design folks in both the region and the main office. Everyone stepped up from the alignment, the profile, the how do we get this acro structure over the existing, to how are we going to design this diverted alignment, what kind of profile are we going to need, taking into account hydraulics and other needs. And then the design of the new structure, which happened here in main office with our main office structures folks. Within weeks of the incident, we were looking at draft plans for the new bridge. Some very important decisions were made about how we're going to build it. For example, structural steel is always an issue. Having to go out and find the manufacturer to get those big beams built. We happened to have beams in our yard in Utica that had been used previously for temporary structures, and we said, you know what, these would work in this location. So we looked at those beams. We had our structural people analyze them. They said these will work. We cut them down. We did a little fabrication work on them. We had them painted, and we were ready to move forward.
So when it came to a permanent bridge, how do you build back for enhanced resiliency and flood resistance? Like, what kind of innovative components did you put into this new structure?
This is an I mean, it's, you know, like that it happened, but it's an opportunity now that you do have to rebuild this bridge. You can, you know, potentially make it so that, you know, if a storm like this ever happens again, it is, you know, you are prepared for it.
Yeah, we are seeing these kind of storms and weather impacts more than ever before. So what are we doing to build back in this way?
So the structure that was there was a 50-foot span, and with the replacement, our structures engineers and our folks in the region and main office looked at this and they said, you know, what can we do to try to make this a more resilient structure? And they said, well, let's look at going with a wider span so we can allow for more flow underneath the structure. So we had a 50-foot span. We ended up replacing with an 80-foot span. So we have an additional 30 foot of bridge that allows for greater current underneath the bridge. Hopefully, if we have another one of these events in the future, that will help address it. We also went with a structure that is now supported on piles. Those piles provide a great level of resistance to scour and other issues. We put some very large, heavy stone out in front of the abutments to really kind of armor that whole area should we have another event. And we went with what's called a jointless bridge construction, which is it allows for a structure to function and operate without having a joint directly over the beams. One of the biggest issues we have with structures is water infiltration and intrusion, and water and salt and ice over time will actually eat through those structural members, and so we want to keep them as dry and as comfortable as possible.
And for those of you who listened to Harry White earlier on, he mentioned jointless building, and I believe he said there are two types of joints. Ones that are leaking now and ones that will leak in the future. So being able to put in a jointless one is, you know, obviously going to help that long term.
Yes. Yeah. So in the long run, we've built a structure that will have a greater resiliency and in the future, hopefully not have these same types of issues.
How has the community responded to this new bridge, and how does it make you guys feel to know that you've really made such an impact on this community that was really devastated?
It's very interesting to watch the community. Their social media really took a hold once this all took effect and everything closed down. The Facebook pages that they had, just the communication back and forth between everybody to help each other. And then when it was open, it was the news spread like wildfire when it opened, and then
I bet
everything's back to normal, basically.
You guys were heroes of the day, I'm sure.
It was a lot of work done in a short amount of time.
Yeah, the response from the community was overwhelmingly positive, very supportive. The day that we reopened the acro structure on the existing alignment, news got out we were going to open the bridge, and we had a half a dozen cars coming in from Newcomb that were they wanted to be the first to cross the bridge. They were there, so we stopped and I went and talked with them, and it was interesting and a little funny because of the 5 cars, 3 of them were on their way to the ice cream corner in Long Lake, which is the intersection of Stewart's and Haas and Custer's Last Stand, the best ice cream in town. So there's three purveyors of ice cream, and they were everyone in Newcomb was jonesing for an ice cream cone. So they were very happy to be able to find their way across.
Let's touch on something though. This was not just the two of you. Even though you put your heart and soul, it seems, into this project, this also took a small army of other people as well. Can you maybe mention that too?
It was all of our staff at Hamilton County DOT. We had the county DPW, Region 1, Region 7 from Warren County and Franklin County came down and helped. And then we had the towns of Inlet, Long Lake, Indian Lake, and the town of Webb that also assisted. with us to get the road back together, not even about the bridge. That was to get the road open back up between Blue Mountain and Long Lake.
So on the construction side, we mobilized 3 separate contracts. We mobilized regional where and when. An existing contract that we have in the hamlet of Racket Lake, a bridge replacement that's ongoing. We mobilized that contractor, and then we had the statewide emergency bridge contract. We mobilized that to take care of the structure in Fishing Brook. So we mobilized quite a few resources. There were a lot of people and equipment, and DOT resources and consultants were on board from day one.
Well, thank you both, Chris and Rick, for joining us today and for sharing the work that you did on this project on the 28N Bridge in Long Lake. We thank you for your public service. And before we go, we like to ask all of our guests 2 very important questions. And this has to do with some of your favorite spots across the state. The first one is, when you go out on a road trip, what is your favorite DOT highway to travel on?
Any road in the Adirondack Park.
Yeah. They're all beautiful in my book.
I'm going to share that sentiment, but I have a special place for Route 20 in Region 2, Madison County. It's just a beautiful place, beautiful spread valleys and farmland, and it's just a beautiful place to drive.
Nice serene spot. Okay, second question. What's your favorite road trip and song?
Any Charlie Musselwhite song.
I enjoy 80s rock and AC/DC, Metallica, Led Zeppelin, you name it.
No arguments here. Well, again, thank you both so much for taking the time and again for the work that you did, and the work for that your entire departments did, and everyone else who volunteered, who helped out. I mean, it really is one DOT. Yes, you guys are in Region 2, but calling on others when necessary, that's what New York's all about. So thank you to all of them as well. And thank you, like I said, so much for joining us. I do want a quick shout out. Thank you to Heather Tehan, Region 2 PIO, for helping set up this meeting. She's sitting in here with the studio with us. So thank you, Heather. And again, thank you both for taking the time to sit down and talk to us about this. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that is it for us here from the DOT POD. We will be back in a couple weeks. Until then, we'll see you right here on the DOT POD.